Hello, dear friends. I hope you are doing good and welcome to our Tech Helpline channel.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. So, in this today's demo, actually, we are going to see about microservices. So, for that, I have created one presentation. So, in this presentation, actually, we are going to see completely about microservices. So, these are the points. The first one is microservices definition, and the second one is what is microservice architecture, and third one is when to use microservices, and who uses microservices, and about a monolithic architecture versus microservice architecture, and characteristics of monolithic architecture, and also there is what are the benefits of microservices, and it includes also disadvantages of microservices, and how are microservices deployed, and best what are the best practices for microservices. So these are the points which are we are going to see one by one. So let's move on. First point, that is microservices definition. So microservices is an architectural design for building a distributed application using containers. They get their name because each function of the application operates as an independent service. This architecture allows for each service to scale or update without disrupting other services in the application. So here you can see the microservice architecture is mentioned there. So you can see there are main a diagram name is applications, and there are different microservices are present, and there are different containers. Public cloud is there, also there virtualize and bare metal. So let's move on. Next slide. So what is microservice architecture? Microservice architecture is an architectural development style that allows building applications as a collection of small autonomous services developed for a business domain. It is variant of structural style architecture that helps arrange applications as a loosely coupled service collection. The microservice architecture contains fine-grained services and lightweight protocols. Let's take an example of e-commerce application developed with microservice architecture. In this microservices architecture example, each microservice is focused on single business capability. Search, rating and review and payment each have their instance, that is server, and communicate with each other. Here you can see in diagram microservices architecture e-commerce application. Okay, let's move on next page. The third point is when to use microservices. Ultimately, any size company can benefit from the use of microservices architecture if they have applications that need frequent updates, experience dynamic traffic patterns, or require near real communication time. And fourth point is about who uses microservices. Social media companies like Facebook and Twitter, retailers like Amazon, media provider like Netflix, ride sharing services like Uber and Lyft, and many of the world's largest financial services companies all use microservices. The trend has seen enterprises moving from a monolithic architecture to microservices applications, setting new standards for container technology and proving the benefits of using this architectural design. So let's move on next page. Here you can see the fifth point is about monolithic architecture versus microservice architecture. The monolithic architecture pattern has been the architectural style used in the past, pre-Kubernetes and cloud services days. In a monolithic architecture, the software is a single application distributed on a CD-ROM, released once a year with the newest updates. Examples are Photoshop C6 or Microsoft 2008. Here you can see the difference between monolithic architecture and microservices architecture. That style was the standard way of building software, but as Tech has evolved, so too the architectural style must advance. In an age of Kubernetes and CI/CD workflows, the monolithic architecture encounters many limitations. Companies need to push to microservices. So let's move on next page. Characteristics of monolithic architecture. Changes are slow, changes are costly, hard to adapt to a specific or changing product line. Monolithic structures make changes to the application extremely slow. Modifying just a small section of code can require a completely rebuilt and deployed version of software. If developers wish to scale certain functions of an application, they must scale the entire application, further complicating changes and updates. Microservices help to solve these challenges. So let's move on next page. What are the benefits of microservices? Increase agility, improve workflows, decrease the amount of time it takes to improve production. Microservices are small applications that your development teams create independently. Since they communicate via messaging, if at all, they are not dependent on the same coding language. Developers can use the programming language that they are most familiar with. This helps them come work faster with lower cost and fewer bugs. Microservices improve your architecture's scalability too. Also, as more and more enterprises embrace the cloud, you are probably looking that way too. Microservices are a great way to get there. So let's move on next page. So in this page we are actually going to discuss about disadvantages of microservices. Of course, the microservice architecture comes with a learning curve. First time users might struggle to determine its microservices size. Second one is the optimal boundaries and connection points between microservices, the right framework to integrate services, and more broadly, microservices have these below are the drawbacks: increased complexity, more expensive, and greater security risk. So let's move on next page. How are microservices deployed on different servers? Deployment of microservices requires following: ability to scale simultaneously among many applications, even when each service has different amounts of traffic. Quickly building microservices which are independently deployable from others. Failure in one microservice must not affect any of the other services. Docker is a standard way to deploy microservices using the following steps. Package the microservice as a container image. Deploy each service instance as a container. Scaling is done based on changing the number of container instances. So let's move on next page. Best practices for microservices. You should be able to tell by now that making the shift to microservices creates a lot of benefits for development, operations, and the business. They create opportunities for increased scalability, greater reliability, and cost savings. Here are some best practices that will help your migration. Keep in mind separate data store for each microservice. Second one is keep code of a similar level of maturity. Third one is separate build for each microservice. And last but not least, always treat severe as a stateless. So like that we have completed the first demo on microservices part. So thanks for watching.